This is Café Wish Podcast, and this is the third live that I have done so far. Um, so, welcome. For those who are new and have not um, seen any of my lives, once again, this is my third live, or haven't seen any of my videos, this is a brand new podcast. Um, welcome. The objective that I'm trying to accomplish or try to do for these weekly lives is to touch base with my potential audience, my future audience, the audience I'm trying to cultivate, the community I'm trying to build here at Cafe Wish Podcast. And so you guys can also see my personality, see how I think, how I process, and also to touch each other, intellectually, being able to speak to each other, comment, exchange. Okay. Um, so if those who have been following my podcast, I have made some uploads. Let's see here. Uh, I'll just start with my first video. My first video is colorism, part one, and then it goes to colorism, part two and part three. Um, Before I actually get into that, I want to say this: every talking point, or not talking point, every video that I upload is usually so far going to be based on my interviews that I conduct weekly. Um, so I do weekly interviews. I meet with different types of personality, different types of people, and ask them questions. All of my interviews are coming from a research that I'm working on. Um, if you continue to watch and participate and become a part of this community by like, sharing, and subscribing, then you will get to learn a lot more about um, what my vision is for this channel, what my research is about, and why CWP at all. So you will, you will get to learn a lot about uh, the vision I have for this channel. Okay, so I upload almost every day, and each segment that you may see, like the first three episodes or parts that I've uploaded, one is colorism part one, the second one is colorism part two, the third is colorism part three. Colorism is a very uh, sensitive topic, but yet it's a popular topic, um, especially in the States. Me being an American, it's very important that we talk about things that matter to our society. Um, and one of those things is colorism. Now, race is a sensitive topic. Some people like to talk about it, some people don't. But colorism is something that affects us every day, from music videos to the media to the news outlets to movies that we see, how we feel about ourselves. Colorism affects how we think about ourselves because when we look at the media, the multimedia arts, we see um, the magazines, we see in movies, we see in television shows, there is a particular look and image that is perpetrated intentionally to help people um, make money, right? Exploiting colorism. That's just what it is, and that's how we feel about each other. Okay. Um, so colorism is one of those things. Once again, drives home the point of how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about one another in society. Colorism is based upon what you look like. So, what someone looks like will determine how they are treated. Most people don't see that in America that are white because they don't have to live in that reality of uh, They don't have to live in that reality of having to deal with what you look like to a to the degree that people of color, particularly and specifically Black people. So I encourage you to check out colorism as a segment. The next segment I have is a Black Like Me. Um, that is going into people of color um, who live similar experiences as quote unquote Black people. Today's world, we identify Black people politically as those who are recently from Africa or um, who have, due to colonization, who are recently from Africa within the last 500 years. African descent um, or African ancestry, that's who Black people are labeled as today politically. Now, a Black like me is, I like to take it as a universe that allows overlapping and intersectionality, where people from different communities, different colors, different ideologies can come together and be able to relate to one another. And in this segment, I'm interviewing people to talk about the indigenous people groups. The indigenous people groups are usually called Black or notified as Black people, or notarized, excuse me, as Black people. Depending on where you are in the world, around the globe, everyone thinks once again of Black people from a political perspective as someone who's African or African descent within 500 years. That's not all. That's not accurate to suggest that because race is a pseudoscience, it's not a real science. Okay. Um, so with that being said, a Black like me is to once again stretch out our imagination, look at genetics, look at our societies, and see who is really Black here. All right. Um, Not just based upon what politics or nationalism someone has, but truly based upon um, what our genetics are, and is all this is based upon my research, by the way. Out of the motherland of Africa is a theory that I follow and I'm building a lot of my research on. Um, it's about the diaspora of how we as people, as humans, have evolved socially. Okay, how we evolved in our culture, how we evolved in building civilizations through our migrations. And when we migrated to different continents, we brought along with us our culture, our identity, how we saw ourselves, all at that time. Um, and this is around about 100,000 years ago, give or take. Fast forward today, a Black like me is to address first humans and relate it to today. Um, Understanding that first humans are Black, the indigenous people around the globe are Black. Moving up to today, looking at who is Black, not based upon politics, based upon based upon um, not politics, but based upon the reality of who we are. Once again, looking at our genetics, looking at our migration patterns from way back when till now, looking at our behaviors, the colonization, the indigenous people. It's not just looking at one face. We're looking at several faces. Just like a cube has six faces, there's multiple faces to this. Um, so a Black like me, once again, is to allow people who believe that they are Black or expanding their imagination, who share the sentiment of Black people or Blackness, what it means to be Black, and who relates to that, and also people who are um, genetically Black. Okay, moving on. The third segment was what I like. I definitely support the LGBTQIA plus community. I am myself a member of the LGBTQIA plus community. Um, I consider myself queer, pan queer, pan gay, whatever. But I have a segment called "A Gay Like Thee." A Gay Like Thee uh, is talking about the lived experiences of how gay people, LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, um, all the letters in our community, how we live our lives, but it's through the lens of gay people at first. So before I can expand this into a bigger segment, I'm just literally starting with a gay like me or gay like thee. That's how I'm starting it. And then I'll expand it from there. So a gay like thee, once again, is about lived experiences, something that we all can relate to, who's part of the community and who's not part of the community. Addressing not just homophobia, but heterosexual phobia, dealing with people of the LGBTQ community who have phobias of heterosexual people, and also the traumas. LGBTQ people who have traumas from lived experiences that they have with the heterosexual community, and vice versa, right? Giving a place and a space for heterosexual people to be able to relate to LGBTQ community people, to say that people are people, we are people as well, okay? Um, and to hear the stories and the experiences of people who identify as gay. I'm going to start there. And then as the channel grows and as that segment evolves over time, then I can expand to different letters a part of the community. Okay. Going back to a black like me, which I wanted to address, there's something called Negrophobia. It's also going into the lived experiences that people have who identify as black or is labeled politically black. Negrophobia is talking about the unrational fears that people who are not black, quote unquote, politically. What do I mean by that? So genetically, over 90% of the human population is genetically black. That's not an argument. That's not a debate. That's factual. We are different variations of black. Now, because we live in a political polarized world, those who do not identify as black people can develop negrophobia. White people can develop negrophobia. It is literally the unrational fear of black people. If someone has never experienced a black person before, never been around a black person, don't have friends that's black, don't have anyone in their family that's quote unquote black, there are stigmas and there are stereotypes and there are cultural biases that people can have towards black people, um, or black people groups. Uh, there are tropes that people create or carry on from generation to generation, from way back when, 500 years ago till now. Um, all these proverbs and wise saying about black people can turn into a culture of people maligning people who are dark skinned, or because of their biases or their stereotypes, they treat people a certain way. They think about black people a certain way. And because of that, it creates a condition to where others who do not identify as black or do not see themselves as black, and even going into talking about white people, they muster up different ideas and create jokes, create sayings, other stereotypes, not based upon experiences, but based upon uh, um, unchecked fear, unrational fear. Um, so that's another thing about negrophobia. I just wanted to address that. Moving on to the next segment. Okay, faith, fear, and frontier. Faith, fear, and frontier is a segment that I address when I talk about. Literally, it's in the title. I talk about faith, what faith means to people, what faith means to me, what it looks like from culture to culture, what it looks like from different people. Fear. I talk about rational fear, irrational fear. I talk about how fear can control you, how fear can manipulate your mind, um, the different types of fear, um, and then making life decisions based upon fear. Literally, it's covers a whole variety of uh, isms and schisms, dealing with paranoia, also anxiety, um, dealing with all those things. Okay, and frontier. Frontier is going into direction of life, where someone is going, where someone's headed. Frontier is literally the distance between two borders or multiple borders. Okay, and starting in one place to the other. Um, and how you're going to get there is the journey. So if you start from one place and you enter that one place, the distance between the two is your frontier. How you're going to get there is your journey. So faith, fear, and frontier is dealing with what someone believes spiritually, right, in their faith. Um, Fear, things that hold people back from believing and from having faith, for acting upon what they believe is good or right for them. And then frontier, going into direction of life, acceptance, where someone's heading, feeling a sense of community of belonging, and how people are going to navigate tough situations. So it's not about self help. That's too much of a cliche. And there's other people out there that can motivate you and to help you. What this channel is all about is expressing ideas, exchanging ideas, talking about different topics coming from cultural, religion, philosophy. I'm a humanist, right? I believe in the ingenuity of humans. I believe in the spirit of humanity. I believe in the greatness and the possibilities of what humans can be and who they were, who they are, and who they will be, right? I'm a humanitarian. I believe in helping my fellow brother and sister, right? Um, and being able to assist where I can. And also, if I'm going to address who I am faith wise, I'm a Hebrew. So, what does that mean? So, that means that I believe in the Bible. I believe in Jesus Christ of Nazareth. I believe um, in spirituality. I believe in African spirituality. I believe in African mythology. I believe in um, everything that comes from the motherland, from culture to spirituality to mythology, I take on through the lens of the Hebrew because I believe I'm a Hebrew. I believe genetically I'm connected to that line of people. Um, and I have facts and evidence that can support that claim, but that's not what the channel necessarily is about. This is just about my faith. I'm just going to give you a little window into me. Um, so when I address certain topics, even if you listen to my interviews, I talk about race a lot. I talk about cultures a lot. I talk about science, sociology. I talk about all these things because this is what is important to me, but it's also the world that we live in. Politics, yeah, I address it only in keeping in line step of how uh, sociology shows up in our lives, meaning um, racial politics, right? Cultural politics, nationalism, national politics. Um, what else? Eurasianism. I talk about that. Afrocentric, Afro-Asiatics. I talk about that. Um, I talk about different demographics and how people relate to one another. This is what the channel is about: expanding people's minds and horizon of what it is like to be a human and living in their shoes. but it's through the lens of a humanitarian, through the lens of a humanist, through the lens of a Hebrew, who is identified and labeled politically as black. So it's coming through my lens and how I see the world. Now I do have a degree in religion and philosophy. It's if I don't have a doctorate, then it's pretty much useless in the real world sense. But this is the first time I got a chance, or I'm getting a chance to actually use my degree. So I'm kind of excited about it. I'm a little nervous, as you can tell. Well, maybe you can't tell. I'm just really starting this podcast out, and I'm not used to looking at myself or watching myself on camera. Uh, so please forgive me as I am working through this adjustment. But hopefully, I can improving to give you better content and become a better YouTuber, podcaster in the social media game. Anyway, so moving forward, uh, speaking of, like I said, faith, fear, and frontier, um, showcasing my faith, fear, and frontier right now. Anyway, moving forward, I have another segment called deconstruction of faith and religion. So I address what like a black like me. I addressed uh, a gay like thee. I addressed faith, fear, and frontier. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, so I addressed colorism. Colorism is going into a black like me. So colorism is a black like me. So I addressed black like me, gay like thee. Um, I addressed faith, fear, and frontier. Now I'm addressing deconstruction of faith and religion. So it's important to, I believe, to break down what you believe and what you were raised in, whatever religion it is. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, or you should believe this or you should believe that. I think everyone has the ability to make their own decision for themselves. I just want to persuade people and to provide a space, an opportunity, and a safe space for people to be able to dialogue or hear conversations that I may have, or questions that I may pose relating to faith and religion, and to challenge themselves, to challenge their belief systems, to challenge why they believe what they believe. How did they come to believe what they believe? What is their religion about? If it's Catholicism, if it's Christianity, if it's Islam, if it's Judaism, if it's hoodoo, if it's voodoo, if it's any mythology, if it's whatever you believe, whatever your moral compass or your spiritual center is, whatever that is, um, I want to address it, and I want to address why someone believes it. So that's the goal. That's the vision for that segment. But I start with what I know. I start with Catholicism. I start with Christianity. I was raised Baptist. I was raised in Christianity. I was raised Pentecostal. I was raised around Catholicism. Um, Definitely in the military. I was assistant to the chapel while I was doing my training, um, and I assisted. I actually was the prayer leader during boot camp when I was serving in the boot camp. Serving in the United States Marine Corps. While going through training, I was the prayer guide during boot camp. I was the guide during Marine Corps combat training, known as MCT. Um, and then I also was the assistant to the chaplain during that time as well. And I also got a degree in religion and philosophy. So my whole life has been about religion, philosophy, sociology. Um, and my parents did a great job raising me and my siblings to have a foundation about what faith is and what religion is, and also to be independent thinkers. My parents raised me and my siblings not to be followers, not to be uh, people who just go along to get along. My parents raised me and my siblings to be independent thinkers, to speak out and to speak up about what they believe in, and to be professional as much as possible, to be loving and caring as much as possible. to be able to induce and deduce, to be able to create our own thoughts and stick to what we believe in. Um, so I carry that with me. And so the deconstruction of faith and religion is taking all of who and what I am and how I was raised and saying, okay, this is the world that we live in. Why are things the way that they are? And I know I'm not the only one who thinks this way. I know you probably think that way as well. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I'm sure most people have questions or have had questions. What is my religion about? If it's Catholicism, if it's Christianity, why do I believe this? Where did this come from? It's important to deconstruct that, in my opinion. To deconstruct that so you know what the strengths are, where you know what the weaknesses are, where the loopholes are, um, and you have a surety of knowing what you believe and having the confidence to believe what you believe, regardless. So not everyone, I'm not going to be for everybody, right? I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. And I'm not expecting to be. I'm very niche. um, so my main audience, the audience who I'm looking to reach, the people who I'm looking to engage, is black people globally. What I mean by black people globally, I'm not speaking to white Eurocentric parameters of race. I'm not speaking to white Eurocentric cultural, political uh, thinking systems that they had put in place, the eugenics. I'm not speaking to that. I'm not speaking to white Eurocentric ideology. I'm not speaking to white Eurocentric religion. I'm not speaking to white Eurocentric Eurasianism. I'm not speaking to white Eurocentric American exceptionalism. I'm not speaking to none of that. I'm speaking to what I believe and what I think, right? I'm speaking to what my research has showed me and what I can demonstrate factually. I'm speaking to the reality that my audience is that my intended audience is people, black people globally, whether you're Asian black, which most indigenous people in Asia, if not all, are black, Australian black, most indigenous Australians, if not all, are black, African blacks, most indigenous Africans, I'm pretty sure we all can suggest that they are black. Indigenous Europeans, most people don't know that the indigenous Europeans are black. The very small population of them that exists now, but they are black. And also, not just people who are indigenous, but people who live in these places, who live in Asia, who live in Australia, who live in Europe, South America. The indigenous people in South America are black, um, and the people who live there, right? North America, the indigenous people there are black. They call them Indians, but they are black. Um, and due to colonization, due to transatlantic slave trade, due to the trans-Saharan slave trade, due to the Silk Road and the slave trade that happened there, people were dispersed throughout black people were dispersed throughout all the whole globe. So my intended audience is to reach those people um, first. Secondly, is the people who can relate, people who want to uh, relate to black people or who see themselves as black, but politically they may not be. So what does that? So what does that mean? Somebody may be Filipino, and they may say, "Well, I'm Filipino, um, I'm Moreno," or but if they are indigenous and consider themselves black, and they have a connection to what I'm saying, this is for them. Um, and that goes for anybody in Asia, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in Europe, whether they're in South America, whether they're in North America. It doesn't matter. My audience, my intended audience, is for these type of people. That's I'm speaking to first. Um, to people who are black. Second, to people who believe that they're black. And thirdly, I'm speaking to people who are allies, right? People who consider themselves allies to black people. I'm speaking to you as well. And thank you for your allyship. All right. Um, the last segment that I have available right now on my YouTube podcast, Café Wish Podcast, is whiteness in film. Um, so, whiteness in film is addressing um, the tropes, the stereotypes. Like, pretty sure if anybody watches movies or is a movie buff, you can relate to this. All the superhero films, all the hero films in general, usually paint a picture of a white Eurocentric man or woman. From the 1920s to 30s of the silent films, if you are a movie buff like me and you know a little bit about history about film, then you know back in the 20s and 30s in silent films, popularized films that were silent were predominantly white, right? Created by white people. There were black um, cinema. The black cinema was there uh, during the Harlem, excuse me, uh, the Harlem Renaissance. During the Harlem Renaissance was it kicked off so many different aspects from uh, the arts to politics to sociology to all the sciences. The Harlem Renaissance was a special period in America, and it reached not just only America, it reached globally. Okay, and so going back to whiteness in film during the 1920s and 30s, the silent films, majority of them were white Euro American people or white Euros in general. Then you have from 40s to the 50s, you have the classic Hollywood, um, which everything was ritzy and beautiful and elegant, and the dancing and the moving and the clubs and all of that amazing stuff, right? That people love about classic Hollywood back in the 40s and 50s. Traditionally, you will see uh, men. It was common to see the hero be a white guy. It was common to see the the beautiful lady, to be a white woman, right? The damsel in distress, so to speak. Um, and if you saw anybody who was black, they were the help. Anybody who was a person of color, they were the help. They always played some buffoonery role, or they played some role that was idiotic, insignificant, and definitely uh, stereotypical and filled with tropes. Okay, uh, if you know anything about that point in history and time in cinema and film, everything that was white or any white film that you saw, white people were the most desirable, white people were the most wealthiest, white people were the most richest. That's what they displayed and showed. I'm not saying that wasn't true in society because art definitely does imitate life. Life does imitate art. But nonetheless, there's reasons why things were the way that they were um, in film. And I want to speak to that because what you see in film is always going to indicate what's going on in society at that time, right? That's why the saying is very much true. Is art imitating life or is life imitating art? So whiteness in film is going over the history of silent films from 1920s and 30s. It's going over classic Hollywood films, uh, 1940s and 50s, the 60s and 70s, black exploitation films. It's also going on. I'm going to be addressing the black Hollywood, so to speak, Black Harlem Renaissance films. I'm going to be addressing the 1970s and 80s and 90s films um, during those 3 decades, right? Coming off of disco and coming off of the black exploitation films, we walk into the late 70s and 80s and 90s dealing with hip hop. Hip hop has taken off and movies begin to change. Music, if you pay attention, music starts to change, and this is where the narrative of Black people are challenging um, roles here and creating more opportunity for each other, and not just in films, but in art and poetry, in music. So yeah, so but whiteness in film is to address the ills that false representation of people of color, particularly, but specifically black people, to address that. Whiteness in film also addresses the classical view of how white Euro people and white Eurocentric people are displayed constantly in the representation of that. Even to the point that in my research and my study, that there is a universal understanding of globally, if anybody is in a film, like I'm living in Asia, right? If there's an Asian film that's being produced, most of the time it's going to have a representation of someone who is not necessarily a darker hue. They're going to find they, meaning as people who create these films, design it and create it to showcase people who are light, bright, and almost white. And that's just a true saying. And once again, because the indigenous people are black, I can't recall seeing any black agents in any films. Maybe one, maybe a couple movies that I have seen black Asians. What I mean by black Asians, indigenous Asians. But for the most part, me as my lived experience, and that may be anecdotal for some, but but we can look at a whole spectrum of films from spanning from the 80s, and we just take it from the 80s till now. If we look at 80s up till now films from Asia to Africa to Europe to South America to Australia to North America, Africa may be a little different, but majority of the films are always going to showcase uh, people who or actors, characters that are light, bright, almost white. That's not by accident. That's by design. Uh, and whiteness in film addresses that. Whiteness in film also addresses. I want to address um, the real. So in history, anytime anybody, if you ever seen like a historical film, right? If you've seen a historical film, let's take Moses, right, in the Ten Commandments, right? Let's take Noah, or the one that came out like in 2018, 2019, something like that. We take that film. We take any film that's about Egyptians, right? Any film that talks about antiquity times. We take the movies about the Spartans, right? Uh, those are all misrepresentation of film. That's why I say whiteness in film versus the real. Because if you know the history, if you know the research, whiteness in film is always going to lean towards telling a narrative from a white Eurocentric perspective of a people that they are not even related to, or they they are definitely not those people, but they're using whiteness to demonstrate who these people are. That's not by accident because in films the corporate look for any main character is always going to be either white Eurocentric or have the features of a white or the representation of a white Eurocentric looking person. Um, so whiteness in film addresses that. It addresses